And hopefully we'll be talking again real soon. That is Kevin Barrett out of Madison, Wisconsin. Again, viewers, you're looking at these live images coming out of Mashhad.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Where at least 1 million people have gathered there for the commemoration of their heroes, the procession of their bodies. And as we saw earlier, I think it's raining and it's pretty cold. Despite that, the people feel that it's their responsibility to come out and pay their final goodbyes and respect to these individuals. I'd like to cross over to Istanbul and welcome my next guest to the program, political commentator Yusuf Erim. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Yusuf, tell me about that side of things. Tell me the type of reaction you're hearing about what is taking place in Turkey.
Well, there's mixed reactions coming from Turkey, but the one reaction that everyone agrees on is that this was a targeted execution by the United States. This passed many red lines, that this was no different than just basically an assassination, an extrajudicial killing of a state official. Whether you like the man or don't like the man, that's your opinion. But killing a state official, that crosses a red line and opens up a Pandora's box. This is not a precedent that a country like the United States should be setting, and this is something that everybody agrees upon. Now, different political circles obviously have different views upon what they think about General Soleimani. There's some in Turkey that like him, there's some in Turkey that dislike him, depending on this certain political party's interests. But like I said, one thing that everybody does agree on is that the United States crossed a red line that should never have been crossed, and now they've set a dangerous precedent that could quite possibly destabilize the Middle East once again.
And it's interesting, and it's not just the United States. We've seen several Western governments actually coming out and supporting what the Washington regime has done. We have the German government spokeswoman saying on Friday that the U.S. strike, which killed Soleimani, was a response to Iranian military provocations. It's as if no longer are there any rules to follow. Basically, the law of the jungle seems to be at hand. They're saying possible Iranian provocation. Of course, we know that U.S. President Donald Trump had said it was preemptive based on what Lieutenant General Soleimani wanted to do. What's going on? What is happening in your perspective here?
Well, first thing, we haven't seen any type of clear evidence why the United States decided to carry out this assassination. And the second question, I think the most important question is why now? It's not like General Soleimani was just appointed general. He's been around for 40 years. He's a name that we've been following ever since I've been following politics. Why did the United States decide to assassinate General Soleimani now? Mm-hmm. What is different now? What has changed? I don't see anything as having changed, at least not since President Trump has come to office, that would require this type of extreme action on behalf of the United States. Just a couple months ago, we saw President Trump courting a meeting with President Rouhani. So what happened that tipped President Trump to take such brazen action against Iran? Have the Iran hawks in the U.S. government finally flipped Trump? Did he blame the Iranians for the protests in front of the U.S. embassy? That's something we don't know right now. That's something that only President Trump can answer. But we can definitely see that he has changed his line against Iran, and that now peace and negotiation seem very far away, and we could quite possibly be headed towards a spiral of escalation that is unfortunately going to very negatively affect Iraq first, most likely Syria second, and quite possibly other countries in the Middle East like Israel and the UAE and Saudi Arabia as well.
All right, I'd like to welcome my next guest to the program out of Belfast, author and Middle East affairs expert, Saeb Shaath. Thank you so much for being with us. Our other guest in Istanbul asked the question, why now? Many have been asking. I want your perspective about the role of Israel in all of this. Is it that, as we've had many analysts say,
stay like 10 more minutes.
Saeb, do I have you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
That Israel actually has been after this forever, wanting to see the killing of Lieutenant General Soleimani, of course, themselves not wanting to do it, but finally got the United States to take care of this for them. Your take on that possibility?
Before I get into why and the involvement of Israel, we have to understand, first of all, General Soleimani, when you see the millions who went out paying respect and saying prayers and tributes to him, he wasn't just a hero in Iran. If you look at the people who received condolences in Gaza and in Beirut, in Baghdad, even from Canada to Yemen, you'll see this man is an international figure. A figure who stood against the oppressors, a man who stood beside the people of Palestine and developing their capabilities to stop the aggressor of Israel against them in Gaza. If we witness the development of the Palestinian resistance from the year 2005, when they kicked the Israeli occupation from Gaza, till then Israel enforced its own siege on Gaza, till today, at the last stand with one Palestinian group, which is Jihad, Islamic Jihad, in November 2019. We understand there is a capabilities now. One Palestinian faction can stop the Israelis. This is what put the Israelis to panic. Their project of training and financing with the United States of America, Takfiri groups to destroy Syria, failed with the help of course, Al-Quds brigades, which is Soleimani was leading. The same thing when the Takfiri groups of Daesh and the rest of them tried to take over Iraq. Soleimani was at the forefront of the training Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, the people mobilizing unit in there. So we can see as well in Yemen, when the Yemeni people, the Saudis, started attacking them with the help of the United States of America, giving them coordinates where to hit and what to target in Yemen. Destroyed, devastated the Yemen. Today's the Yemenis, in one attack, they stopped half of the Saudis' production from Aramco going to down the world. This is rang the bells around all the multinational companies who are looting the resources of Arabia and the rest of them. That little group called the Houthi or the Yemenis can stand against the empire, against Saudis, and so they seen and then pinpointed who was training and transferring technology to them to get this precise rockets and drones. They blame Soleimani. That's why you can see the panic in the region from Netanyahu and from then the United States of America. Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, was keen to tell the Israeli Prime Minister to inform him actually before carrying out the assassination of Soleimani. And always he said, repeated that the USA will be always grateful to Israel consistent support in defeating terrorism. That's what Pompeo was telling Netanyahu. Netanyahu was only one, the only one in the whole world who praised the assassination in saying it was the assertiveness and the courage of President Donald Trump plausible, taking the decision to carry out the assassination. That's what Netanyahu was stressing out. But at the same time, today, Sunday, was the Israeli cabinet, which is the many small kind of kitchenette who runs the Israeli security affairs. The Israeli cabinet convened today, Sunday, to discuss the assassination of Soleimani and how to deal with the consequences or the scenarios of bombing Israel, military targets and infrastructure as a retaliatory response from Iran or the resistance camp. Netanyahu discussed as well today in the cabinet meeting how Israel transformed itself, and the Hebrew state, he says, into a nuclear power. this line, what he was discussing today, was a direct threat. We can interpret that as a direct threat against Iran. If you target us, we're going to use the nukes against you, and the whole world is watching. So we can really see in here the fingers of the Israeli intelligence playing and planning and helping in carrying out the assassination, while Donald Trump become the assassin himself. He gave the order. So saying that, Donald Trump, the liar, let me call him, rode to victory in 2016 on the ticket that he promised the Americans to end what he called at the time the useless wars on the Middle East, and to bring the soldiers back and to stop squandering the billions and trillions of Americans' money in wars in Syria and useless wars in Syria and Iraq. Of course, he lied, and the first thing he done, we all know, he targeted Iran with sanctions and withdrawing from the JCPOA nuclear agreement with Iran.
Viewers, if you're just joining us, you're looking at these live images coming out of the holy city of Mashhad as commemoration ceremonies continue. The bodies have been taken inside of the shrine, and people are bidding farewell to their heroes. And we have reports of 1 million people who've turned out at Imam Reza's shrine to say goodbye to their heroes. Crossing back over to Istanbul, and Yusuf, the ramifications now for the region. Of course, not only Iran has promised very strong response, also today we heard the Secretary General of the Lebanese resistance movement, Hezbollah, saying that the Americans will pay a heavy price for it. He said now that all American military facilities and installations and ships and troops are fair game, and they will be targeted. He also at the same time said, not the American people. We're not talking about ordinary American citizens. We would not target them. We're not terrorists. We've been the ones that are stopping terrorism. Your take on that and possible effect in the region?
Well, when we look at General Soleimani, we have to realize that he's not just an important figure in Iran. He was the head of a multinational network of Shiite militia, and he was very important in many different countries. Like you said, he's very important in Iraq, very important in Lebanon, very important in Syria, and all these countries highly respected the man. Also in Yemen as well. So when you strike a man that's multinational, that's beyond just one country, you're going to get a reply, you're going to get a retaliation from many different countries that respected the man and that quite possibly owe their freedom and owe their political livelihood to him. And the United States, I hope when they were planning this execution, that they were also planning for the backlash they're going to get. Some of the comments we're seeing coming out of Washington right after the assassination, calling it a defensive strike, and then immediately stating that they're committed to de-escalation. This insults the person's intelligence that's actually reading this comment. You don't perform this type of extrajudicial killing and then call for a de-escalation right after it happens. That's not the way tit-for-tat politics works. We live in a world where there's real politics and there's going to be very real ramifications, whether it be in Iraq or many other countries that Soleimani had people faithful to him that are willing to retaliate against U.S. troops. And the main concern is this hopefully will not spiral out of control now. I'm joining you from Istanbul, and I can tell you that one of the things that the Turks are worried about is escalation. Turkey already has two destabilized neighbors in Syria and Iraq, and the last thing the Turks want to see is any type of kinetic conflict between the United States and Iran. That would be a nightmare scenario for Ankara, and they want to stay far away from something like this. And I think this is something that could further destabilize the region beyond anything that we've seen. So hopefully cooler heads will prevail. Iran will obviously seek its retaliation. This is expected. This is tit for tat politics. The United States most likely expects this to happen, and hopefully after some time, once cooler heads prevail, maybe there could be some mediation and these two countries can once again sit back at the table and negotiate some type of lasting peace.
All right, thank you so much for being with us. I understand you have to leave. Appreciate you being with us. Yusuf Era, political commentator out of Istanbul. Again, viewers, you're looking at these scenes, aerial shots now from the shrine of Imam Reza in the holy city of Mashhad in Iran, where up to 1 million people have actually gathered at the shrine to say goodbye to General Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, who gave their lives continually as they have been fighting against oppression and were targeted, of course, by the United States. A political assassination that definitely we will see many ramifications from. Saeb, Shaath, you mentioned the Palestinian side of things. I want to talk about that as our other guest, Yusuf, had mentioned, these individuals being international figures. I want to talk about Gaza. I want to talk about the Palestinians. And I want to talk about how actually it was, of course, first it was Imam Khomeini and his perspective in dealing with Palestine, that it is the most important issue of the Muslim nation, and continue to work on that line. And individuals like General Soleimani did their best to help the Palestinian resistance and also to bring everyone to be one, despite the continual negative type of publicity that the United States and other Western countries continually talked about, a Shia-Sunni divide. We know that the majority of Palestinians actually are not Shia, and we also know that it was Iran who has been some of the biggest support of the Palestinian resistance. And I want to talk about that and the role that General Soleimani, Lieutenant General Soleimani, has played in that resistance of the Palestinians.
I just wanted to comment. You may yourself answered Yusuf in his comment about Soleimani. General Soleimani was having a leader of a lot of Shiites organization around the region. He is mistaken in saying that. The closest figure I can bring from the historical perspective to who is Soleimani, this is for the Yusuf to understand, is Che Guevara at the time. And Che Guevara wasn't helping at the time the people in Africa because he's a black, or the people in Asia because he is of Asian, or this. It was an internationalist effort. And yourself, you touched on one major thing in here. It's the ideology, it's the religious duty, which Khomeini brought with the revolution forward as number one at the agenda of the Islamic Republic of Iran, is to stand ideologically, religiously with their brothers who's been oppressed in Palestine and in the region. It's in the same equivalent. This is religious. The other one was ideological in Cuba and in Latin America. But just for him, maybe at least I can give him some similarities so he can understand. When General Soleimani, you can see in the wake in Gaza, you can see the ones who's receiving the condolences of on behalf of the Iranian or the internationalist community of Soleimani. You can see leaders of the PFLP, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They are socialists. You can see other outfits, Muslim Sunnis like Hamas, Jihad, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. They are Sunnis. As you stated yourself, very few Shiites in Palestine. So the resistance in Palestine, from socialist to nationalist to Islamic to all of that, were there receiving condolences from the people for General Soleimani. The people of Gaza devastated because of the people of Gaza themselves. They understand it was Iran, and General Soleimani was the figure who was doing that and supporting and providing the Palestinians with as much help as they can. They did that from the days of Arafat, the late Arafat, till today. It didn't matter for Iran who is the organization at the time of for General Soleimani. They supported Fatah as a nationalist organization. They supported the socialists in Palestine, the left wing. They supported the Islamic groups, and all of them, because they know at the end of the day it matters the enemy who is in there, and the duty of the collective to fight that enemy. And the same perspective General Soleimani carried in Lebanon, from when he joined the ranks of the resistance, from a young man till the last day when he was assassinated by Trump in Baghdad. He was in the battlefield fighting the enemies of the Ummah, the enemies of the whole world, the terrorists. He was providing a great service to humanity, this man. And then he was killed by the people who wanted to preserve their own assets, the terrorist assets, which they use from here to there. Trump, when he came, he was in the election canvassing in the United States of America and putting his programs to the people, if he had any. He was stating that Daesh and all of these Takfiri groups are the creation of the Democrats. He was saying Hillary Clinton in the United States of America, and the deep state, which is implicated the CIA and all of the Americans. That is Trump's own statements at the time. And today, he is going there. When he won the election, he lied to the people again, and he become involved even in deeper things in there. We remember in 1999 when President Clinton at the time, during the impeachment process, he to delay the vote on the impeachment, he declared he have to carry out in 1999 airstrikes against Iraq, and we needed the army there, so the House have to postpone or delay the impeachment process. The same thing today. He is putting the people, the Americans' people lives at risk to delay the impeachment and to save Netanyahu in Israel, the criminal Netanyahu who's supposed to go to jail for briberies and for a lot of fraudulent crimes. So both of them gang together, and both of them carried this assassination, trying to benefit out of it personally and to save their own outfits, terrorist outfits in the region.
All right, stay with me, Saeb, Shaath. We're looking at these live images coming out of Mashhad. And of course, as I had mentioned earlier, we have seen people turn out across Iraq, Iran. Or screen, there's news. Israel, death to the USA. Major demonstration there. A major demonstration condemning the political assassinations took place on Friday morning. We're looking at the rippling repercussions of the targeted assassination by the United States regime. And I'm sure this is just the very beginning, because still and now they're going to be flown from Mashhad to cross back over colleague Saeed in London. Saeed.
Marzia, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. We're back from London with our coverage of the American assassination of General Soleimani of the Quds Force and the PMF commander Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and Baghdad airport Friday. who joins me here in perhaps by what happened this afternoon. The Iraqi Prime Minister is saying the Iraq's lawmakers will be voting on expelling American troops from Iraq. Fill us in on that.
Yeah, the vote that took place was almost unanimous. There were some Kurdish representatives and Sunni representatives that didn't attend and boycotted the vote, but those that did attend Iraq. And I go to one tweet from Jane Araf. She says, "This is stunning. Iraqi Prime Minister tells Parliament US troops should leave. Says real Donald Trump called him to ask him to mediate with Iran, then ordered drone strike on Soleimani. Says Soleimani carrying response to Saudi initiative to diffuse tension when he was hit." Now, if this is true, if what was said in the Iraqi Parliament today was we've seen in the United States two things. And Islamic Republic of Iran. So this is very worrying signs, and I'm sure more will come out as this story unfolds. We've got another tweet from a Syrian girl.
Correct.
Who says, "Do you see the hundreds of thousands of Iraqi men attending Soleimani's funeral in Baghdad? They'll likely turn on US soldiers. The US won't be able to stay safe in Iraq. Pompeo lies about the assassination being popular will come back to haunt him."
This is perhaps about that video that Pompeo published. Met members of the are they what the American described them as?
Yes, so I was in there in October. I actually flew into Baghdad International Airport, that's the scene of this horrific crime. And the first thing that I thought of is, imagine being in a civilian airport when an American drone strike takes out a military operation right next to it. And reprehensible illegal action. But in regards to the Popular Mobilization Forces, the thing that I noticed straight away when I went to Baghdad, Karbala or Najaf, you'll see their pictures plastered on the lampposts. If you go to hospitals, the forces don't have to pay for hospital treatment in some hospitals. Their children don't have to pay school fees. These people are heroes. When they walk down the streets, they're mobbed by people wanting selfie with them because these guys are just something else. Today exists as a
religious and ethnic diversity of Iraq. Perhaps we can talk about that briefly as well. The command of the PMF, al-Ibrahimi, known by his nom de guerre as Abu Mohandes, a Shia. But that is not the PMF, is it?
No, it's not. They have a Yazidi faction. Because let's not forget, Daesh, this terrorist Takfiri group, threatened the whole of Iraq, threatened every single denomination and sect that they did not prescribe in our interpretation of Islam. So that's why volunteers listen to the call to join and volunteer to fight against Daesh and defeat Daesh. This is something that we'll get into a bit later. Now, the United States is truly fighting a war on terror. They should see Qasem as their allies in the fight in the whole world than Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and the PMF units.
Fighting the real terrorists. How about we move on now? Linking General Soleimani, now Lieutenant General Soleimani, to the September 11th attacks, but does
important to show some elements of the American media are not even going along with this crazed act of aggression by the United States and Donald Trump. Now I'm going to read out the Mike Pence tweet. It's laughable how ridiculous it is. Travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists who carried out the September 11th terrorist attacks in the United States. Now, what's worrying about this is the Vice President of the United States doesn't know that it was 19 hijackers in 9/11, not 12. Secondly, he doesn't know the very basic in regards to Middle East politics. If he did, he'd know the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and these affiliated groups hate the Islamic Republic of Iran, hate Shia Muslims, and would never. Thirdly, there was a vigil held in Tehran to commemorate the victims of 9/11, something that is completely missed in this analysis. And fourthly, the 9/11 Commission, Truth Commission report, which has many inconsistencies, but one thing that it did say was Hezbollah and Iran had nothing to do with 9/11. So it was series of tweets, and there's more that I'll read out later, but it says, here's what the 9/11 Commission concluded. Hezbollah from the Vice President, it says, attacks on American diplomats and military personnel. The world is officials across the board. They're saying these things without any evidence to justify the unjustifiable, because if they were to say we took out this guy that was taking out Daesh, it doesn't look good to the American public. So he has to come with these statements that cannot be verified, that doesn't have one shred of evidence. And the last part of that tweet, the world is. The Iranians have vowed revenge. Hassan Nasrallah has vowed revenge, which we'll touch on later in the later stories.
More dangerous place than just a few days ago. The question is, like, what are they banking on? On the world's collective amnesia? Like, you know, you easily, and I think a lot of people can do the same thing, just only a click away, you can find out if this is true, or who was on those planes that crashed into the World Trade Center in the United States. Yeah. Do they not know that they're going to get found out?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 19 hijackers, 15 were from Saudi Arabia. There's been evidence presented from the victims of the families that Saudi Arabia had some role that's been ignored by the US State Department, ignored by Congress, and the internet is there. Now, I've got one more tweet that is really shocked me, and I've been following the politics in the region for a long time, but this one was just something else. This is from the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. It says, targeted 52 Iranian sites representing 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago. Some at the very high level and important Iran and Iranian culture, and those targets in Iran itself will be hit very fast and very hard. The US wants no more threats. Now,
did he learn that from Daesh, like hitting religious and historical sites?
I mean, that's an important comparison you make, because if we think of who targets cultural sites and important historical sites, it is Daesh, Al-Qaeda in Timbuktu in Mali or in Palmyra in Syria. So Donald Trump is threatening the very actions that are used by the terrorists that he claims to oppose. It's stunning, and
a war crime in essence.
A war crime, a threat of a war crime.
A sitting American president promising to commit war crime
against cultural sites in your country, in countries of some of the colleagues here in the office. It's terrifying, and this type of language will not go down well, I don't even think, with the American public. So we'll wait and see.
We sure will. Shall we move on now?
Yes. So I've picked another American source, the CNN, because I'm trying to make the point that even some elements in American media are starting to see this for what it is.
Correct.
And from CNN it says, it's important to remember the role Soleimani played in the fight against ISIS. So even CNN can recognize this, but Donald J. Trump, Mike Pence, Pompeo seem to not recognize the role that Soleimani played. So I'm going to go to a tweet from What Read. It says, at Max Blumenthal told hundreds of anti-war activists outside the White House today why Qasem Soleimani was killed. He rolled back the Salafi jihad forces the CIA had been backing in Syria to destabilize another independent state, and he helped to prevent Iraq from becoming a US client state. So there's a video which we're going to play from Max Blumenthal, who was with me in Venezuela, and he's going to give some of his analysis of why this has happened.
Let me explain to you why Qasem Soleimani was killed. It's very simple. Because he rolled back the Salafi jihadi forces that the US, the CIA, had been backing in Syria to destabilize another independent sovereign country, and he helped prevent, by organizing the popular mobilization units, Hashd al-Shabi, he helped prevent Iraq from becoming a US client state. It is that simple, and the assassination of Qasem Soleimani is revenge for his success in rolling back the most vicious imperial plot that we have seen in recent years, which sought to have black flags, the black flags of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the organization responsible for the 9/11 attacks, flying over Middle Eastern cities.
And shocking revelation there by that individual. Is there anything you want to add?
Yes, I do. So there's something that needs to be stated here, and something that's controversial, and that is the collusion between the United States and some would argue the United Kingdom and other Western allies and these Takfiri terrorist groups. Now, it started back in Afghanistan when they funded the Mujahideen, which then became the Taliban, which then had its role in 9/11. But even more recently in Syria and in Libya, with the principal objective of removing Gaddafi in Libya and Bashar al-Assad in Syria, they backed the most reactionary Takfiri forces throughout the region and spread chaos and misery. And this is a guy that stopped their objectives. Syria is still standing as a sovereign and free nation because of this brave martyr that we see in the picture to our right. And that is the reason some will argue that he was taken out. It was nothing to do with what happened at the US Embassy. It was nothing to do with allegations of US troops being killed. And even regarding those two allegations, what happened at the embassy was in response to what I mentioned earlier. The popular mobilization forces are popular amongst the Iraqi people. So when they were killed by a US airstrike, it was the Iraqi people that went to the embassy and voiced their anger and frustration. And to strip the Iraqi people of their agency, of their right to protest, and to say it was Iran orchestrating it all, is to deny them of their humanity.
Contrary to what the Americans have been saying.
And it denies them of their humanity. Iraqis are humans just like me and you. They have respect for their heroes, and they do not want to see these acts happen on their land. So I've got another tweet.
Go ahead.
That I'm going to go to from Ben Rose. Ben says, this all started when Trump pulled out of the Iran deal. It should never have come to this, and absolutely didn't have to. He created this crisis. I'm just going to say this. This maximum pressure policy has to be declared as the worst policy decision the United States has ever embarked on. It has not worked. If he thought that the North Korean approach would work on Iran, it hasn't. It's failed. And now he needs to reassess his options, because this path is leading to a very dangerous place, not only for the United States, but for its allies in the region. And it's best for the United States and the future of its role in the region to reassess and rethink its options.
It sure will have to do that. Let's talk about what the Secretary General of Hezbollah, an ally of Iran, said in the past few hours, Hassan Nasrallah. What he said, among many other things, was that the U.S. is going to pay the price for the killing of General Soleimani, repeating the same line that we have been hearing coming out of Iran. How is the U.S. going to pay the price from your point of view? Because this is the $64 million question. And what form will the Iranian retaliation or revenge take as we move forward?
See, that is the $64 million question, because we know it's coming, but how and when is the question that many don't know the answers to as of yet. But there will be a response. And Hassan Nasrallah has said there's not a military base that is safe. And we believe him. This man and Hezbollah were responsible of defeating the Israelis on the battlefield. They've defeated Daesh on the battlefield. They're the most seasoned fighting group in the whole of the Middle East. They know what they're doing. These are not some bandits in the desert like al-Nusra and Daesh and all that. These are a well-armed, well-financed, organised, disciplined force. And what Hassan Nasrallah has said is, let's think back to the 1980s. It was those same forces that kicked the US out of the region the last time. So history has a funny way of repeating itself.
Can we look at some of the tweets as well, as far as
Yes,
that?
so Jane Ferguson says, funeral prayers for Qasem Soleimani held in Hezbollah stronghold in Beirut. Death to America screamed again and again. I've been living in Beirut for 6 years and never seen so much anger. I want to just touch on this, because this is, they cut on Sky News the death to America in the Iranian parliament today, and they cut it in a way to demonize the Iranian public. To say, look at these fanatics, they're screaming death to America.
Yes.
They cannot be trusted, they cannot be negotiated. Death to America is a political slogan. It doesn't mean death to Americans. It means death to the exploitative system that exploits the people of the world and goes to war every couple of years for resources and to sanctions countries like Venezuela, countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, Iran, Sudan, the list goes on. It's death to that exploitative system of the United States that sees the whole world as its playground with little pockets of resources that it can go into as if it's some sort of safety deposit bank.
And bullies other countries into abiding by those sanctions.
Exactly. So when they say death to America, they mean death to the system of the United States of America, which exploits everywhere and constantly goes with this aggressive posturing against the smaller nations. So I think it's an important clarification.
Yes, take us to Twitterverse and see what people have
so
been saying about
Junaid says, according to Hezbollah, Nasrallah, the martyrs who took out America out of the region in the past, i.e. Hezbollah suicide bombers who caused the US to withdraw from Lebanon in the 1980s, still exist, and there are many more of them than before. Hezbollah, Nasrallah, #Soleimani. So this won't end anytime soon, and there will be some sort of response. It's important to understand what it would mean for the Allies.
Yes.
So what will the United Kingdom do? The silence of Boris Johnson is deafening, and I think he's very worried about what's happening. Now, Boris Johnson is often painted as this buffoon, as this clown, but in my opinion, he's a very intelligent man, and he knows the US action has endangered American lives, British lives, Saudi lives in that region, and has caused massive destabilization. And he's worried. He doesn't want to follow the United States off a cliff, and that's what the United States has essentially done, is jumped off a cliff, and this could be the beginning of the end of the US empire as we know it.
And do you think the US will be alone in locking horns with Iran if and when this gathers more momentum and turns into even more serious of an issue than it is now?
That's an interesting question, because the US thought that when it jumped off the cliff with the JCPOA agreement, that the European allies would follow them, and they didn't. Germany and France, although they could have done a lot more in many people's eyes, they stayed committed to the JCPOA, and the UK to some degree. So we've already started to see, especially with the emergence of Donald Trump, a fraction between the United States and its allies. There's been splits within NATO. There's been splits and disagreements when the United States tried to bug its allies in Germany and France and elsewhere.
The German Chancellor's phone.
Yeah, the German Chancellor's phone, we all remember that. So it's interesting to see what it will do. I don't think, personally, that anyone apart from the United Kingdom outside the European allies will follow the United States. The United Kingdom may do, because it sees itself in this precarious economic situation following Brexit, and it's so heavily reliant on a trade deal with Donald Trump and the United States. But will the other European countries want to do this, knowing that the consequences will be felt by them and their population? I'm not sure, and it's something that we'll have to wait and see.
A turbulent decade, they say it's going to be, and we're going to have to see how things are going to pan out as we move forward. And we're going to leave it at that. Thank you. very much for that insight and those tweets. Let's move on. As shockwaves from the U.S. assassination of Iranian and Iraqi commanders continues to ripple through the Muslim world, British Muslims here in London have joined the international mourning to honor their passing. Robert Carter attended one majlis and brings us the view from Muslims living in the West.
Muslims in London have attended a mourning ceremony to honour the memory of top Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani and deputy head of Iraq's popular mobilization units Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis. The two are seen as heroes, credited with defending the region from foreign aggression and terrorism.
The US assassination of top Iranian and Iraqi commanders at Baghdad airport on Friday has sent shockwaves across the region, forging unity in the face of US interventionism and also spreading the echo of revenge across the Muslim world.
The US claims that the targeted killings were justified, but speaking to mourners here in London, they not only reject the US narrative, but also back calls for retaliation.
People understand you're lying. We like Iran. Iran is Iraq, and Iraq is Iran. We are one. We are one. We are one. I'm from Iraq. I tell you, Iraqi and Irani, they are one. So don't lying. Yeah, Iraqi love, like, trust Iran, and opposite. So we are one. Iraqi and Irani are one. If you believe or not, you lie, I answer to you.
Key human rights in their definition is whatever's to their advantage. Anyone else, they don't care. They would kill everything, just like what Trump has done. And he made a very big mistake.
Both Soleimani and Abu Mahdi played a key role in defeating Daesh, which, at its peak, threatened a complete takeover of Iraq and Syria. Speculations remain as to what Iran will do next. Funeral processions have been held in the holy cities of Karbala and Najaf on Saturday, but once the mourning period ends, the anger will remain. What comes next is anyone's guess. Robert Carter, Press TV, London.
And our correspondent Robert Enlikish has been monitoring the potential fallout and joins me in the studio. Robert, thank you for being with me. You've just come from the demonstration at the U.S. Embassy in central London. What was the mood like?
Of course, people are grieving and people are calling for some sort of response against the United States. We saw Iraqis, Iranians, and also a lot of British people there protesting. And of course, this was to be expected. There have been multiple protests, and it's not just been in London as well. It's been across the United States where people have been protesting against this illegal assassination of General Qasem Soleimani. Yes. So, of course, the people on the street there were crying out that this operation will spark a wider war in the region, calls of concern. Of course, people as well were there with posters which read out the United States out of Iraq. People were very much against the presence of the United States in Iraq, in the Middle East in general, and were calling for an exit of U.S. forces from Iraq. And of course, we've had that vote in the Iraqi parliament today. 170 lawmakers voted to expel the United States forces. So that wish has been granted. And of course, more and more the protests gained more and more traction. More and more people came throughout the day. And of course, there's going to be a lot more protests like this. It's not just one-off on this occasion.
Speaking of protests, and there's been a lot of talk of blowback. Who else is going to be affected as a result of what the Americans decided to do?
Well, of course, it's speculation at the moment. We don't know exactly what is going to happen. But what we do know is that Iran has allies all over the region. So one of the places, perhaps, let's start with one of the examples, Afghanistan. Not many people talk about this, but tensions could be inflamed there as well. And of course, the newest leader of the Taliban has taken a different sort of position than the older sort of generations of the Taliban in terms of how how it views Iran. And of course, over there's a lot of ways which it could be stirred up. Then we need to look to Iraq, just with what's happened today with the vote in the Iraqi parliament and the Iraqi forces now calling upon the United States to remove its forces from the region, from its embassy as well. And we know that all of its diplomats have been already removed. So at the moment, as it stands right now, the United States is nothing more than an occupation force in Iraq. There could be an insurgency. We could see with the Hashid al-Shabi, we could see them rallying up possibly over 100,000 people to fight this insurgency to oust the United States. And that could inflame, of course, a massive war if the United States was to respond and not to get out of Iraq. So this could be a very dark day for Iraq if the United States chooses to be irresponsible, if it chooses to act like a terrorist entity and it chooses to stay there. And then we can move over to Syria. Of course, the United States has its forces stationed illegally against international law, against the sovereignty of Syria, inside of Syrian sovereign territory in the Deir ez-Zor province. And of course, they're open to strikes. There's no air defense there for it, and that could be inflamed there. We could also see strikes from Syria. This is all just possibilities at the moment. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but of course we could see potential strikes from Syria, perhaps into the Golan. Israel has been flying its planes over southern Lebanon up to Beirut in mock raids throughout the past few days, which indicates perhaps that it is going to launch another air raid operation. That's very possible. The Israelis have done it frequently, hundreds upon hundreds of strikes that they've even admitted, many more beyond that, of course.
These strikes into Syria?
Into Syria, yes, absolutely. And last year, it significantly damaged the Syrian air defense to the degree of about 60%. Their abilities were reduced, and of course they said they targeted Iran, but they were targeting Syrian assets, and that can be shown through satellite footage and evidence of who was killed and what was damaged. And of course we know that Israel acts irrationally and struck into Lebanon last year as well. If Israel is flying its planes over Lebanon, maybe the resistance there, the Lebanese Hezbollah, which has vowed that all U.S. bases across the region, that all planes, that all assets of the United States military are valid targets if the Israelis are to fly their planes over into Lebanese territory. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. Thank you so much. Okay. And thank you for watching this special coverage coming to you live from London. We're going to hand you back to my colleagues back in Tehran. Keep watching Press TV. More coverage of this historic day in Iranian and Middle Eastern history coming up right here on Press TV.
Thanks so much, Saeed. Appreciate it. And viewers, thank you so much for staying with us at Press TV as we continue our coverage, of course. And we have been going live since Friday morning after the assassination of Lieutenant General Soleimani and also Lieutenant Commander Abu Mahdi. That took place on Friday, and now we have been following the procession of their bodies. Of course, these two individuals were accompanied by 4 other individuals who were martyred alongside of them. The bodies had the procession in Iran right now. Prior to that, in Iraq, in a few different cities where people have turned out in mass to say goodbye to their heroes. And right now, the bodies of these heroes are in the holy Iranian city of Mashhad, to be flown to Tehran, where we have a ceremony taking place right now in Tehran commemorating the lives of these martyrs. I'm going to cross over to Gisu, who's standing there at Mosalla, where this ceremony is taking place here in Tehran. Gisu.
These are very tragic days for Iranians. I really don't need to explain. I believe that the pictures fully explain what the mood is and how the people feel. The ceremony that I'm attending right now is called the Bidding Farewell ceremony. It's a ceremony to say goodbye to those that we have lost, including Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani. Marzieh, I cannot tell you enough about how sad these people are and how angry at the same time they are at this bold move that the U.S. dared to take. In this particular ceremony, right before we started talking to you, people were calling for revenge. They were asking the leader of the Islamic Revolution to take revenge for Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani's targeted assassination that happened, which was a big shock and something that people really did not expect to see Donald Trump take such an unexpectedly bold move. Of course, he is a very unpredictable person, but what happened was beyond all that. This is practically a declaration of war. And the people who are here from all walks of life, which I've been talking to, all say the same things. It is very interesting, Marzieh, to see that people with different political views have gathered here in Tehran's Grand Mosalla to take part in this particular ceremony, which is customary before the actual funeral procession, which is going to take place tomorrow morning in Tehran and later on in the hometown of Lieutenant General Soleimani in Kerman. So it was amazing to see just how many people gathered in this huge place. Tehran's Grand Mosalla is a huge place, and people from all walks of life, Marzieh, are here, and they're all saying the same thing. People from different political views have gathered here. They are united in one front, and they are all expressing their anger, and they're calling for revenge. These people are not people that will calm down so easily, Marzieh, and I believe there's going to be a really great response to what happened to Lieutenant General Qasem Soleimani.
Thank you so much, Gisu. That is Gisu Ahmadi at Mosalla in Tehran, where that ceremony is taking place. And of course, originally the ceremony, not only to say goodbye, but also the bodies were supposed to be there. But with the situation that took place in Mashhad and the amount of people that showed up, estimates say up to 1 million people have shown up. Gisu, can you hear me? Because I know that there's a lot of noise there. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm assuming that she can't hear because there are a lot of, obviously a lot of people there, a lot of noise. Anyway, that's Press TV's Gisu Ahmadi. Thanks so much for that. Again, you're looking at these live images coming out of Tehran, Mosalla, and a major ceremony, commemoration ceremony taking place tonight in Tehran to bid farewell to the heroes who stood up against terrorism, farewell to the heroes who defeated the terrorists, farewell to the heroes who made sure that security remained in this country and others. So we can cross back over to Belfast, talking to Saeb Shaath. Saeb, thanks so much for staying with us. The amount of anger, I can tell you, that we're hearing from the people, regardless of the cities, and regardless if we're talking about Iran or Iraq. I mean, it seems like if the goal of the Trump administration or the United States was, one, to cause more division between Iran and Iraq, two, to stop the resistance, I think that it's definitely going to have an opposite effect. Your take?
You see, you're right. Trump is a property dealer. His understanding of everything around him and the world of immediate gains right now. And he thinks, and his advisors like him, because he got most of people like himself who can listen to him and they have nothing of kind of intellectual capabilities around them. So when he takes a decision to benefit him and benefit his master, Netanyahu. I know it's not the right way to put it, but actually for United States of America's, the chief commander, the president, is the Netanyahu who advises him and who tells him what to do. And we see the result. At the end of the day, he compromised the national interests of the United States of America and its interests, economical interests in the region, to appease the Netanyahu, or at least to save himself, or to delay the impeachment process. But he didn't know the targeted killing of a hero, of the General Soleimani and his colleagues, is a game changer in the whole region. To start with, when we witness what the Iraqi lawmakers did today when they approved the bill to expel the US military forces out of Iraq, it's an actual declaration of initiating the second phase of Iraqi liberation war from the United States of America's occupation. That's what it means. It legitimized, that bill legitimized every bullet, every stone, every action is taken by any Iraqi to attack the Iraqi occupation in there. This is the Iraqi parliament who represent the nation, the Iraqi people, and the consequences of that. All the entanglements, all the laws, or even the constitution, which divided Iraq in so many weak provinces to be ruled by mobs belonging to the United States of America, will be ruled out and be cancelled and changed and amended, or a new constitution will be again. The Kurdistan of Iraq as well, the way it takes more than its share in the oil, and the way it acts as an independent state, and it trade and buy weapons without going back to Baghdad, or host American bases, or Mossad, Israeli Mossad bases in there. All of that going to be reviewed and be cancelled. So it's a game changer move, that one. And in the resistant today, the resistant figures and the movement organization are regrouping, and they declared they have to coordinate more, and they have to harmonize their own moves. When we seen today Hezbollah Secretary General Saeb Hassan Nasrallah said in the response to the blood is boiling in the region, and the expulsion of the U.S. forces must be the first target.
Well, Saeb, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you right there. You mentioned the name of the Secretary General of the Lebanese Resistance Movement, Saeb Hassan Nasrallah. Let's check out, have a soundbite from his speech earlier today. Let's take a listen.
This is the beginning of a new age, a new history, a new era, not only for Iran and Iraq, but the entire region. 3 years since Trump has been in office, he had declared a certain foreign policy in our region and in the entire world. When he looks, and he and his administration look at the result of the 3 years that he has been in office, what does he see? He sees failure, more failure, and more defeat, and more puzzlement, more problems. There is nothing that he can give to the Americans when it comes to the foreign policy, especially when he is so close to the new presidential, to a new round of presidential election. Biggest title is Iran. She wanted to control it and control its policies and all the work concerning concerning the ballistic rockets or the region. But of course, Iran did not heed to his threats, did not give in. He enforced many sanctions that are unprecedented in the last 40 years. Sanctions against everyone who deals with Iran, trying to give more blockade, enforcing another blockade, trying trying to threaten people with hunger and famine, to push towards sedition on the internal level, to try to use all the regional tools that he had, but still he failed. Israel understands it. Israel considers Haj Qasem Soleimani the most dangerous man to its security from the day of its declaration. They say that it is Haj Qasem Soleimani that surrounded Israel with the rockets of the Palestinians. They're talking about Haj Qasem Soleimani as an existential threat to its presence to Israel. What they wanted from this targeted, they wanted weakness inside Iraq. They had hoped that there would be weakness amongst the resistance bloc, that the strength that there would be in that connects the resistance groups in the Islamic Republic of Iran. They thought that this would let them retreat, or would let the Iranians retreat from their support from the resistance groups. There is a clear U.S.-Israeli project to have hegemony on our sanctity in order to strengthen the presence of Israel and to take hold of all our natural resources. But what I know from the Iraqi people, and I know from the Iraqi leaders and the Iraqi generals, that the great and honorable Iraqi people, those who are the brothers and sons of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, will not leave one single U.S. soldier inside Iraq.
أيها الشعب العراقي الشريف
honorable Iraqi people, noble and great as you are, I know, and is the weakest faith or the less of your faith that to respond to the crime of killing of Haj Qasem Soleimani and Haj Abu Muhandis and all his companions. The least that you can do is to call for the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq and to liberate Iraq once more and to liberate it anew. And finally, and the response, that there will be just punishment. What do we mean by just punishment? This crime, those who committed this crime are clear, are known, and therefore there must be a punishment. There is no single figure that is in the weight of Haj Qasem Soleimani. The shoes of Haj Qasem Soleimani is as great as all the U.S. troops and all the U.S. Army. All the U.S. military posts in the region, the U.S. warships in the region, every single general and soldier in our countries, on our lands. The U.S. Army is what has killed Haj Qasem Soleimani, and they will pay the price. This is the equation here. When we put this down on the table, this does not mean the American people. Here, I want this to be very clear. I want to be very, very clear. We do not mean that this is a war on the American people. We do not mean the American citizens.
Well, you've listened to an excerpt from an earlier speech an hour or so ago by Said Hassan Nasrallah, of course, the Secretary General of the Lebanese resistance movement, Hezbollah. And he talked very firmly, very strong, and promised that the United States will pay the price. And he asked the Iraqi people, he said, I know you, the followers, the brothers and sons of Abu al-Faz, of course, that being the brother of the Imam Hussein, the two shrines that are in Karbala. He says, you will not leave a single American troop standing there because they must pay the price for killing these individuals. Also said that this is a new era. We have begun a new era now. Basically, there's a new game in town after these political assassinations. by the American regime. I'd like to welcome, I think I have another guest out of Detroit. If you're with me, Abayomi Azikiwe, do I have you? Abayomi?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, how are you? Thank you so much for being with us. Your assessment of all of this, Abayomi. First of all, let's look at the American side of things from the United States itself. And we have seen some demonstrations that have taken place inside the country. But in general, tell me your take, your analysis of the American public reaction to these targeted assassinations.
There's been a lot of opposition inside the United States to what has happened in Iraq. And of course, if you look at the situation throughout the region, where people have united in condemnation of this targeted assassination in Iraq, of course in Iran, and Lebanon, and other geopolitical regions, it's a clear indication that the U.S. government, their actions have violated all standards of international law and decency and diplomatic relations. And this was clearly designed to provoke the Iranian people, the people throughout the entire region, to engage in this type of terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism against the leadership of Iran and Iraq is really something that should be condemned internationally. And I believe that the response we've seen over the last 48 hours is indicative of the outrage that people are experiencing as a result of this. Even in the United States, the representatives of the government are split on this issue. All of the people who have spoken out, even within the Democratic Party, have raised questions about the timing of this, why this was carried out, and at the same time, why the U.S. president took this action with no forward-looking strategic or tactical consideration of what this is going to lead to in the next few days, next few weeks, and for the unforeseeable future. This is like a declaration of permanent war, again, in the region. So yes, I think it's a complete violation of international law, and I believe the majority of the people here in the United States do not want war, another war in the region. There were demonstrations in dozens of cities yesterday. We covered the one in downtown Detroit yesterday, where campus marches was filled with people who were against the war. I didn't hear one negative comment about the demonstration. People were driving by in their vehicles, blowing their horns in support of the anti-war demonstration, and that was the case in cities all across the U.S.
Abayomi, I mean, you're talking about the people in the United States, and as I'm talking to you, I just want to explain to our viewers, they're looking at images right now, actually out of Karachi, Pakistan, where people there have taken to the streets. We saw earlier protests, of course, in other parts of the world, from Nigeria to other areas, the UK, the US, Canada, and Kashmir, of course, among other places. I want to look at that aspect because you said that the United States, the people in the United States, they do not want another war. But on the other hand, there's some analysis that looks at the situation with Donald Trump and it going into an election that actually, when the United States gets involved in a conflict or war, that sitting president, as a matter of fact, usually it gets elected or re-elected. Your take on that side of things?
Yeah, I think this is his calculation that amid an impeachment, a total split within the United States government between the two legislative branches, the House of Representatives, which recently voted on 2 articles of impeachment to end the president's tenure in office, and the Republican-dominated Senate, where they have a slight majority, that is in opposition to the removal of the president from office. And so that means right now that the U.S. government is in deep political crisis. And in response to this, the president is attempting to build support on a basis that Iran is the enemy of the people of the United States, and that any action taken against them is justified. And I think this is a false premise. It may go over among some sections of the U.S. population, but I don't think the majority of the people in the United States are going to accept this pretext for initiating another military conflict. If we look at the situation in Iraq, the U.S. has been there. Well, we had the first Gulf War that started in 1991. There was a big buildup in 1990, and then the invasion and occupation in 2003. You still have thousands of U.S. troops in Iraq. Trump has just ordered earlier more troops, thousands of more troops that are going to be going into Iraq. He's ordered troops into Lebanon as well. This is a very dangerous situation. So where does this end? The U.S. has not benefited at all from these military adventures. We can go back to Afghanistan. That's been over 18 years. There's thousands of U.S. troops still in Afghanistan. They're still dying every single month there. They're in Iraq. They have been attempting to destabilize Syria. They have troops there. They're coordinating a genocidal war against the people of Yemen since 2015, almost 5 years, where tens of thousands have been killed, hundreds of thousands have been injured. We have one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world in Yemen. So this is a no-win situation for the U.S. military.
Well, Saeb, what comes to mind is American exceptionalism once again. We saw this the assassinations that taken place on Friday. And of course, in Iran promised a harsh revenge. And of course, now we've seen tweets by Donald Trump and basically saying, Iran better not do anything. There'll be 52 sites that will be targeted. And it just seems that it's amazing that basically Donald Trump and others there feel that they can do whatever they want. They can treat people however they want. They can assassinate whomever they want, and no one better respond.
Well, they're still living in the past.
The one,
Go ahead,
I think
Saeb.
the one who wrote to him the tweet or give him the list is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of Daesh. Because in his list, he's targeting Iranian cultural sites and historical sites, which belong to humanity. So this is the kind of mentality which Trump, the assassin, is becoming. He's showing his real face now, and he is. And Netanyahu before him today, he threatened Iran with a nuclear attack as well. That's two of them are, they are shaking. They don't know what to do. They don't have an agenda for what to do except what they did. Targeted killing of General Qasemi to save the skin of Trump or the skin of Netanyahu for a short period of time, while creating a trouble in the region, which he marketed to the people in the United States of America that we have an enemy. As long as you create an enemy for the state, then he can unite the people around him. We've seen what George Bush did after he stole the election from Al Gore. And instead of going in the battle with Al Gore, legal battle, he created Al-Qaeda, and we know what happened in September 11th. And suddenly there is not just Al-Qaeda. They manufactured false allegation against Iraq. They tortured people to get false confession that Iraq is linked to Al-Qaeda. The same thing, they went to Afghanistan. The whole region, they waged the war in the region, and now Trump told them, I want to get the prize, which is oil. He said it live on TV. So the whole thing is that he's promising the American people indirectly that I'm going to solve most of your problem with putting my hand on the Iraqi massive reserve of oil. And the other thing you have to keep in mind, they kept the soldiers in Syria and declaring their occupation of Syria is to loot the Syrian oil in Eastern Euphrates. And at the same time, their eyes and the oil multinationals on Iran. Since 1979, they lost control over the Iranian wealth. And that, how to regain the Iranian wealth, keep destabilizing in the region, keep their covert and overt war against Iranian scientists, against Iranian projects, try to make Iran weak, stagnating the Iranian economy, to try to make the people themselves explode against their own revolution, against their own leaders. This is their game. They've been playing it from 1979, over 40 years till today. And there, last year, President Rouhani declared they discovered in Khuzestan, southwest Iraq, I believe, an oil field which is contained 53 billion barrels of oil, 80 meters deep, the shell of it. So the multinationals, they cannot believe all of this wealth is out of their hands. They believe, and they are in their conviction that it's theirs. It's their root. The Iranian wealth, they believe is theirs. And there, Donald Trump, this is another layer of his plans. By initiating a lot of trouble in the area, then they can use Israel as well in the region. They can save Israel, but Israel as a functioning state, that's the role of it. They have to be involved in creating troubles, because Trump, the first thing he did after he became the president of the United States of America, recognized occupied Jerusalem as the capital of the Zionist entity, recognized the annexation of the Golan Heights, the Syrian occupied territories, to Israel, recognized the settlements in the West Bank, which is in the West Bank supposed to be under the Palestinian Authority according to Oslo Agreement, belong to the Zionist entity. So a land grab of the West Bank and the Golan Heights, this is everything they've done, compromise the United Nations national interest and national security in Palestine, in the Middle East, for the sake of appeasing the Zionist lobby in the United States of America and Netanyahu. And if we look again at the Golan Heights, there was a huge oil discovery in there. They didn't, no company from the international companies or multinational companies wanted to touch that, because this is an occupied territory, recognized. But since Trump recognized Israel's annexation of it, he himself and some companies related to him and Israeli companies now looting these resources of Syria. The same thing goes in Syria. But in Syria, the part of the battle, Syria swims in the Mediterranean or inland as well over huge reserves of gas, which they wanted. So they want to deny the whole region of its own resources. This is the greed. When we hear the slogan of death to America, it means death to the imperialist looting of the resources of the people. The people in the Middle East wanted to be sovereign in their own countries and their own resources. They don't want some gunboats coming from Pennsylvania or somewhere and arriving in the Gulf states and looting everything and destroying the people and making money out of the death of millions in there, as they did in Iraq, and they want to repeat it across the region now.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. That's Saeb Shaath, out of Belfast, author and Middle East affairs expert. As viewers, you continue to watch these live images. They're coming out of Mashhad, Iran, as the procession of the bodies of the martyrs continue to make its way. Of course, it made its way to the shrine, and now I think it's probably the procession, the convoy going towards, I would assume, the airport, as the bodies will be flown to the capital city, Tehran, where tomorrow there will be a major commemoration and farewell ceremony, and the prayer which will be led by the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, tomorrow in Tehran. And then on Tuesday, Lieutenant General Soleimani will be buried in his hometown of Kerman. Well, crossing back over to Detroit, thanks so much for staying with us, Abayomi. I want to look at some of what the leader of the Lebanese resistance, he mentioned in his speech, a very powerful speech that he made, and promised the Americans that they will pay a price. When he talks about that we've entered a new era, I want to look at that. There are some analysts that say that we're at a very historic point here, and that there will be a time, it will be West Asia prior to these assassinations, and then West Asia post-assassinations. I want your perspective on this.
Yes, this clearly raises the ongoing crisis to an unprecedented level, from the simple fact that we have a targeted assassination, two of them, against people who have been fighting terrorism, who have been on the front line against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. These are entities that were created by U.S. imperialism. And at the same time, in regard to Lieutenant General Soleimani, he was a high-ranking representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, these are acts of war. These are outright violations of international law. And this should be raised before the United Nations Security Council. It should be raised in international forums. This is totally uncalled for. There was no threat to U.S. citizens or residents, despite what Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, has articulated, that there was some plot to kill people from the United States. It's the United States that is occupying Iraq. It's the United States that is sending thousands of its own troops to Iraq and to Lebanon. So yes, it's the United States who are the aggressors. They are the ones who are provoking this, and they are the ones who are going to have to suffer the consequences of their defeat in the region. This is not the 19th century. The West cannot go into other countries and not expect maximum resistance to their interference in their occupation. And we saw this in the last century, the 20th century, and in the 21st century, the resistance will be even broader and even more effective. And I think this is the desperation of the interests that Donald Trump represents in the United States, the desperation of elements within the U.S. Defense Department, the Pentagon, the interests on Wall Street, which is looking at exploiting the oil of people of other countries. So they are the ones that are provoking all these conflicts that are going on in West Asia and Africa and in Latin America and other parts of the world.
Again, viewers, you're looking at these images coming out of Mashhad, and of course, hopefully you're following breaking news at the bottom. We also had news about